What if the greatest military commander in history never lost a single major battlefield battle, yet still paid a terrible price for every victory? Alexander the Great conquered an empire stretching from Greece to India. Kings feared him. Armies could not stop him. Even today, more than 2,300 years later, he is remembered as the undefeated conqueror. But that is only half of the story. History celebrates the victories. It remembers the brilliant tactics. It remembers the empire. What it often forgets is the cost. Cities burned. Friends died by his own hand. Thousands of his soldiers never returned home. And in the end, even the army that had followed him across the world refused to take another step. So was Alexander truly undefeated, or did victory slowly become its own kind of defeat? But the real story is not just about victories. It is about what those victories erased, and what history prefers to soften. If you enjoy deep historical stories, don't forget to subscribe and like The Marrow of Time. Who was Alexander the Great? Alexander was born in 356 BC in the small kingdom Macedon, a kingdom on the northern edge of the Greek world. From the very beginning, his life was connected to power and war. His father, King Philip II, had already created a strong and well-trained army. It was one of the most disciplined forces in the ancient world. But Alexander did not just accept what his father built, he made it even stronger. As a young boy, Alexander was educated by the famous philosopher Aristotle. Because of this, he did not only learn how to fight in battles, he also learned how to think deeply, plan carefully, and lead people with vision. When Alexander became king at just 20 years old, many people doubted him. Some even believed his kingdom might fall into chaos, but instead of breaking apart, something unexpected happened. Under his leadership, Macedon became a powerful force and grew into a strong machine of conquest that would change history. The secret behind his success. So how did Alexander manage to win so many battles against powerful enemies? The answer was not just strength, it was smart planning, discipline, and the ability to adapt. His army moved faster than most enemies expected, allowing him to strike before they were fully prepared. His soldiers were highly trained and kept their formations even in the middle of chaos. Alexander also led from the front, fighting beside his men, which earned their complete trust and loyalty. One of his greatest strengths was his elite companion cavalry. At the right moment, Alexander personally led these horsemen in powerful charges that broke through the enemy's weakest point and often decided the battle. He also studied his enemies carefully, used the terrain to his advantage, and changed his plans whenever necessary. Just as importantly, he understood psychology. His enemies often feared his reputation before the battle even began, while his own soldiers believed they were fighting under a commander who could not be defeated. Alexander's victories were not built on numbers alone. They came from speed, discipline, adaptability, bold leadership, and the confidence he inspired in his army. The Persian Empire, one of Alexander the Great's biggest enemies, was the powerful Persian Empire. At that time, Persia was one of the largest and strongest empires in the world. Many smaller kingdoms feared its size, wealth, and military power. But Alexander was not afraid. He did not wait or hesitate. Instead, he made a bold move. He crossed into Asia with his army and began his campaign against Persia. Battle of Granicus, 334 BC. This was Alexander's first major battle against the Persian Empire. Ancient historians disagree about the exact timing of his attack, but they agree on one thing: he made the bold decision to cross the Granicus River and confront the Persian forces. The fighting was fierce, but Alexander secured a decisive victory. It was more than just a successful battle. It opened the door into Asia Minor, boosted the confidence of his army, and sent a clear message across the Persian Empire that this young king was a serious threat. The Battle of Issus. Next came the Battle of Issus in 333 BC, one of the most important battles in Alexander the Great's early campaign. In this battle, Alexander faced King Darius III himself, the ruler of the powerful Persian Empire. This was not a small or weak army, it was a large imperial force made up of thousands of soldiers. On paper, the Persians had the advantage in size, but Alexander used smart planning instead of just force. He carefully chose his position and used the terrain to his advantage. During the battle, Alexander led his forces in a strong attack that broke through the Persian lines. The situation quickly turned against Darius's army. In the end, King Darius III fled the battlefield. This moment was very important in history. It showed something clear and powerful. Even the king of Persia, one of the strongest empires of that time, could not stop Alexander in open battle. The Great Showdown, many historians consider the Battle of Gaugamela in 331 BC the most important battle in Alexander the Great's life. In this battle, King Darius III of Persia gathered a massive army. It included thousands of soldiers, cavalry units, and even war chariots. On paper, the Persian army looked far stronger than Alexander's forces. Most people at that time would have expected Alexander to lose, but he did not. Alexander slowly moved his cavalry toward one side of the battlefield. Darius responded by stretching his own cavalry to match the movement. That shift created a gap in the Persian centre. Alexander immediately formed his companion cavalry into a wedge and charged straight into that opening directly toward Darius himself. When Darius fled, the Persian army collapsed, where it caused the most damage and confusion. The plan worked perfectly. The Persian lines broke apart, and once again, King Darius III was forced to flee the battlefield. After this defeat, the power of the Persian Empire collapsed in practice, and Alexander became the dominant ruler of the region. The edge of the world, now we come to an important part of Alexander the Great's journey, especially for South Asian history. After conquering Persia, Alexander moved further east into the region that is now Pakistan. This was not an easy march. The land, rivers and weather created many challenges for his army. He entered the Punjab region and faced King Porus near the Hydaspes River, which is known today as the Jhelum River. Battle of Hydaspes 326 BC. This battle is considered one of Alexander's hardest fights. King Porus had a strong army and used war elephants, something Alexander's soldiers had rarely faced in such numbers before. The battle was intense. Heavy rain, a difficult river crossing, and confusion on the battlefield made everything more complicated. But once again, Alexander won. After the battle, something interesting happened. Instead of killing Porus, Alexander reportedly showed respect for his bravery and allowed him to continue ruling his land under Alexander's authority. But did he really never lose? Here is where history becomes more complex and interesting. In recorded history, Alexander the Great did not lose a major pitched battlefield battle during his campaigns. But this does not mean everything went perfectly for him. He faced real challenges along the way. His army became very tired after many years of continuous fighting, marching and living in harsh conditions far from home. One of the most important moments came at the Hyphasis River, known today as the Bees River in India. Here, something unexpected happened. His own soldiers refused to go any further east. This was not a military defeat in battle, but it was still a major turning point. It was the moment when his army finally said no more and stopped his advance. So while Alexander remained undefeated in major battles, this moment showed that even the strongest leader cannot push beyond the limits of his army forever. The cost of conquest, Cleitus moment at a banquet, Alexander became drunk. An argument broke out with Cleitus, a man who had once saved his life. In rage, Alexander killed him. He reportedly regretted it immediately, but it could not be undone. Power isolation. After this, something changed. Alexander trusted fewer people. Several of his officers were later executed after accusations of conspiracy. Historians still debate how real those accusations were. Power was isolating him. The man who conquered kingdoms was slowly finding fewer people he could trust. Gedrosian Desert. Then came the Gedrosian Desert. There were no enemies here, only nature. Heat, hunger, no water. Collapse. Many historians believe more soldiers died here than in all of Alexander's battles combined. No army defeated him there. Nature did. Hyphasis. For the first time, Alexander could not move forward, not because an enemy stopped him, but because his own men had reached their limit. Why his story still matters today. So why do we still talk about Alexander the Great today? Because his story is not just about war. It is about what happens when ambition has no clear end. Alexander showed that strategy can defeat numbers and speed can break empires that seem unbreakable. With a smaller army, he moved faster, struck harder, and reshaped the ancient world through pure momentum and precision. But the same force that made him unstoppable also made him unable to stop. Because expansion, once it begins, does not naturally end. At a certain point, even success stops feeling like victory. It starts feeling like pressure that must continue, and that is where Alexander's story turns. After years of unstoppable conquest, even his own soldiers refused to go further at the edge of India. Not because they faced a stronger enemy, but because they had reached the human limit of endurance. And after his death, the empire he built across 3 continents did not hold together. It fractured almost immediately into competing kingdoms. This is why people still remember him, not just for what he conquered, but for what conquest eventually cost. Greatness in his story is never clean, it always has weight attached to it. And that weight is what history remembers most. Alexander never suffered a recorded defeat in a major pitched battle under his command. History remembers that achievement, but history often forgets something else. Burned cities, broken kingdoms, friends killed in moments of rage, soldiers lost in deserts instead of battlefields, and an empire that collapsed only a few years after his death. Maybe that is the real lesson. Winning every battle is not the same as winning everything. Sometimes the greatest victories carry the greatest cost. And that's the marrow of it.